Hello and welcome to MusicEL Pathways, the podcast which focuses on the different pathways musicians take in order to reach their musical goals. Today we're going to be talking to another teacher here at MusicEL so you can get to know us all a little bit better. Our guest today is a composer, producer and sound designer supreme. He's had a career in the DJ business as well as writing songs for adverts and TV and also been a lecturer for the past 16 years. Today we have our head of band labs and many other courses in production, Mr. Cy Gordon. How's it going, Cy?
Hi Gary, yeah, very well, you?
Yeah, very good.
Good.
So, as I said at the top, we are going to have a look at the ways in which you've become the musician you are today. You've developed your skills and how basically you've reached your goals of becoming a professional in the musician world, which isn't the easiest thing in the world. But we're going to start all the way back in the beginning, way before you even thought of music being a thing in your life. We're going to have a look at your early years. So how was music around you when you were young? Were there people that played or?
In my nobody in my family played instruments.
Oh, interesting. Did they listen to a lot of music?
Yeah, that was
right, okay.
Probably my biggest influence was my grandparents from my mum's side.
Right.
They were very, very heavily into their classical music, and they would always have classical music on in their house. They had an expensive turntable and an expensive sound system in a dedicated room where they would have an afternoon tipple and sit and listen to, the final collection. Yeah, it was very.
Yeah, that's pretty serious, isn't it? That's taking it to the extreme.
They were very, very astute with a lot of that the way they took it. And then my mum, she was heavily into a lot of rock and roll actually, and massive Elvis fan, and others. And that's kind of really kind of what I grew up around as a youngster. And
bit of Elvis all the time.
Well, yeah, but I'm also a child of like I suppose the late 70s, and then the 80s as a kind of teenager.
Yeah.
So I was, I was kind of soaking up a lot of changes in music coming from the late 70s into the early 80s, and where a lot of
it's quite a vast change in genres in that period, wasn't there?
Massively, because it was all very much live music based up until that point, and then the early 80s, we started to see the introduction of a lot of electronic instruments. So
I guess it was a time where there was a lot of invention happening in the 80s as well. There's a real push for the future and technology, and I guess that just crept its way into music at the time. And
that's it, and technology, and there's the key word. That's kind of what got me. That's all I see myself as more of a technologist rather than a musician, shall we say? Because that's and that's where I got the bug, for technology in the early days. And then I started listening to a lot of early 80s music, and the 80s was just fantastic for music for me.
It's quite vastly different what was going on in all the different sectors of the 80s though, wasn't it? What part caught you most, or were you like into that hair metal rock thing? I'm guessing not. I'm guessing you were probably more on that that disco
synth pop kind of vibe.
Pop.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of very much synth pop, and in the early 80s, and then towards kind of the mid 80s, I started skateboarding. I was a massive, I just every day, lived and breathed skateboarding. Out of school, straight into skateboarding, and
I was the same. I was the same. Even though I live in a coastal village filled with surfers, I was always skateboarding.
That's me. I tried a bit of surfing, but it was just too bloody cold,
Yeah.
And it just didn't work out for me. I didn't like that. I kind of liked that whole side of it. But the music, through skateboarding, I kind of listened to a lot of other genres of music, and I actually really started to enjoy a lot of punk, and then I had the introductions to hip hop around that time as well, which those two music genres I listened to for many years, into the late 80s.
Because the 80s and the 90s were massive for hip hop. Obviously, like hip hop became a mainstream genre at that time, didn't it? You know, it
Absolutely.
went from being something that was going on in the background to, you know, some more pushed forward things.
Yeah.
Is it that Run DMC one's a massive one where they crossed over with Walk This Way? Who do they play with?
I can't remember.
Yeah,
who's the band? I've forgotten the band
Oh,
name.
I can't think.
No, well,
but that track like kind of exploded hip hop into people who would have never heard it. You know, those rock guys who would have never seen a hip hop act necessarily.
Yeah.
Just it became mainstream after that to them.
Yeah, hip hop did. I think I always kind of looked for not the mainstream. You know, both in kind of, you know, punk and you know, I used to listen to like, you know, punk wise, Peter and the Test Tube Babies and the Dead Kennedys, you know, and you know, and artists like that. And hip hop wise, I kind of Man Parish and other artists you kind of wouldn't associate with commercial hip hop, you know. And BDP was a really big thing for me as well at the time, you know. Down Productions. So
how did you find a lot of those artists? Like, were you finding them through friends or
through friends? We used to get a lot of cassettes, you know, around that time, you know, and a lot of friends were. I certainly started buying a lot of music in the 80s, records, as you can see in the background.
I can see behind you. Yeah, I had a feeling that was the case since there's so many records behind you.
Yeah,
you must have started early.
Yeah, a whole wall of records. Yeah, and some that can't even fit in here. So yeah.
Did you start playing an instrument?
I started.
What point did you start that?
I started to play a bit of guitar actually, but I haven't really ever really focused properly on an instrument because the late 80s, you know, I spent a lot of time skateboarding and a lot of time listening to music. I started going out and around that time as well. I started going to because we're kind of talking 1987, 88. You know, a lot of music changed again there. You know, I started to see the acid house kind of. There was hip hop and house, and it kind of all started to break around that time. And I started to kind of get a vibe on house music, and I quite liked the hip house stuff. And then that led me into house music. And I was a teenager then, and then started going out and a bit and enjoying kind of the early rave days, should we say? And and then I started, and then I got introduced to DJing just around a friend's house. I was collecting a lot of records, and you know, he had a set of turntables at one of my friends, and we were just having a drink one night, and just thought, oh, give me a go at that. Let's have a little go. And I think within half an hour, I'd done a mix, you know, and I managed to kind of beat match and learn how to do it.
Yeah. And so you said you didn't learn an instrument, but I would always class turntables.
That's a kind of question. Yes,
I know. Yeah,
it's there's another argument there, isn't there?
Yeah, you can't you've got to practice to be proficient at it.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, you're still making music with it.
Yeah.
So in my head, you know, that is an instrument.
Yeah.
You know. It's the same with singing. Like, some singers don't class themselves as being instrumentalists. And it's like, well, no, you've had to train that vocal cord and you play it as if it was an instrument. Yeah. So you did learn an instrument. It's just some people would class it otherwise.
I think when the whole DJ culture thing kicked off, I think a lot of the music community shunned it, but then it grew into something that was then respected because, you know, that there was a lot of technology being used alongside it, and you could be quite creative. And actually now it's much more so. You can be a lot more creative with DJing nowadays with the tools at your disposal live. But I also think that, you know, DJ culture's kind of got a little bit too mainstream, shall we say, of late, you know, of recent years, and kind of everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon, and it's become a little bit too easy.
I get you.
You know, so.
But I think that's why the guys who are really good at it and have put in the time and have learned all the extra layers of it, it's why they've got so many famous and big songs. You know, there's some like real powerhouse guys who are really well known, and there's lots of guys who do it as well, and girls obviously, but they because they don't take that extra step, they never get that recognition as like the big guy. I know earlier you talked about like Moby, and I think that's he's a powerhouse producer essentially. Everything he touches just blows up, and I think it's because they took that, like I said, they practiced their instrument, they used their tools, and they got really proficient at it. And it wasn't just that putting 2 records on and beat matching them.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it. It's we could spend all day talking about DJing and DJ culture. It's certainly has been a core in my life. I don't do as much of it today, but from then, those late 80s and into the early 90s, it was massive part of my world. And I actually had a really bad accident skateboarding, and actually that kind of ended my kind of skateboard days at the time.
I did the same thing. I absolutely bailed horrifically and broke my leg, and then I was like, hang on, I've got a choice here. I can either play an inch, because if it wasn't my leg, if it was my hand, it would have been like game over for the bass or the guitar, and I would have had to it was a defining moment, I guess. And I'm getting the same sort of feel from you, where it's like I got one choice or the other. I've always been very, very creative, and it's just probably that you like all musicians. I'm very, very creative, and skateboarding was an outlet for me of my creativity, and that mind, that thinking mind, that creative mind, and then after that happened and I couldn't do it as much, it was kind of like, okay, what do I now channel my creativity in? And it was simply it was music, and that was it then. And it was a massive boom, the late 80s and then the early 90s. It's kind of when electronic music just exploded. And and did you perform as a DJ then? Did you do like live performances?
Yes, I've been lucky enough that it took me all over the world. So I didn't just DJ. I started DJing, and then in probably 91, 92, there wasn't a lot of electronic events down here in the southwest, and I felt I wanted to start something in a specific genre, which was kind of like deep house and progressive house. There was nobody doing it. It was all different other genres, and I started my own event company, management company, events promotion company called Natural Rhythm, and that went for 10 years, and we attracted and showcased probably some of the best artists, in the world, the likes of kind of, Sasha, John Digweed, Dave Seaman, the Italians, Americans. I could go on and on and on, but it was great because it also opened a lot of doors for me, because I was kind of like the owner of it all, the manager. Had a team of probably about eight staff working for us, and we were running a lot of events at the time, and not only in Cornwall but in other places in Europe and other places around the country. It was a very, very, very busy 10 years, of events and DJing, and like I say, it opened a lot of doors for me personally. When you're working with those types of artists, it's you get invited to do other events, and I started then traveling internationally and going on a lot of other kind of tours for the likes of Ministry of Sound, Renaissance. And so, again, I could go on. There's a lot of others, and just I spent most weekends, a couple of weekdays, flying out of the country around Europe and going as far flung as the States. I used to tour in the States quite regularly.
I got a question for that. Because I've flown as a musician, and it is it's not the easiest thing to do. We've got a huge amount of gear, like. I remember flying my amp head, which is this giant thing behind me, and a massive bass case and a pedal board, and I think I managed to wangle some of it being hand luggage somehow. What's that like for a DJ? Have you got because in my brain,
a lot easier
I'm
nowadays.
Nowadays you could just take a laptop and you could probably they've probably even got a desk. Have they got desks in?
You don't even have to take a laptop. Obviously, a laptop is a common day thing anyway, isn't it? But you would have a laptop. But nowadays, it's just a flash drives, and straight into the CDJs and however you want to do it, and you go. Unless of course you're still playing vinyl. It's very rare you find a lot of places doing that. Although I say that, it's coming back big time.
I think it's coming back really big, isn't it? Like I know a few guys who are like they were, mixing on electric desks, and now I see them with massive vinyl collections. And you see the like vinyl box come back out,
and that's exactly it. That's what I used to carry around the world. It was a one or sometimes two, depending on if it was a tour and you were kind of away for a week, 2 weeks at a time. It was it was two boxes, and it was hard. It was hard work, but probably not as.
I was going to say they're not light, are they?
They're not
light though.
No, and they're not. They're also quite dangerous after you've had a few drinks as well. So.
Oh really?
Yeah, I've had quite a few sprained ankles in my day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think they are they actually that protective as well? Someone told me that they've got to be like rammed full, or they can still cause a bit of damage to your vinyls.
The earlier record boxes, because we could talk about record box technology, how they developed from really kind of flimsy leather, kind of cardboard almost board, up to what I used to take around with. They were metal, literally metal cases, like flight cases now with rounded corners. And mine's probably still it's in the background over there in the studio. Over in the corner, and if I picked it up, you'd see it's got dents, or whether it's covered in stickers, it's battered, where it's just been literally out of airplanes and thrown on conveyor belts, and
my bass case is exactly the same. It's exactly the same. And someone said to me, they were asking me about a bass case the other day actually, and they were like, "Oh, I'm going to get this plastic one." I was like, "Oh yeah, it'll do one flight," and they were like, No, it's that people can stand on it. I was like, it doesn't matter. They just seem to be the flight attendants or in the plane or wherever it happens. They seem to have the ability to destroy anything made of plastic.
They do.
It has to be metal.
It's got to be, absolutely.
It's got to be metal. Like
and the corners have got to be reinforced as well. That's another another thing. Yeah, definitely.
Because this flight case up here is like my old one. And that got destroyed. That only got destroyed on a small flight to Guernsey, and that was gone. That looks all right as it is, but that's because the other side is absolutely ruined. The metal case definitely the way forward.
Definitely for touring and traveling. Definitely.
Were there any standout performances during that time? Was there any that like you still think about, or that stick out to you as being like somewhere where you afterwards were like, that was the one?
There's been so many. So I used to love the American tours, playing in Universal Studios at the Groove, which was a beautiful kind of nightclub that they just built. That was a tour in where was I? Florida, one time that was great. There was a few other gigs based around that, but that was a very memorable night. It's one of the launch nights, and that was actually I believe that was a Renaissance tour. So playing with Dave Seaman. I used to play another club in Russia that was very similar to that. I used to be a resident there. I spent New Year's Eve, the Millennium 2000 there, and I did 3 gigs that night, and that was playing for that company. One of them, most memorable there, was I was on top of a skyscraper looking out over Red Square as midnight hit. DJing in this kind of glass building, looking out.
That's crazy.
It was amazing. That was absolutely amazing.
I was going to say that's got to be a standout. Like it's like something from a music video, isn't it?
Yeah, but it is totally standout. Every single gig I used to do over there, it's they would put you in the Sheraton. You'd be on the top floor in the penthouse suites, and with with the spas and all that, and
yeah,
bottles of champagne.
Did you see that David Guetta did a new video and he was on top of a skyscraper the other day, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I was like, how do you get all the gear up there? I pity the like roadie who had to carry everything up there just for probably one song.
Yeah.
He probably didn't even do more than one take and then had to lug it all back downstairs. So it's got to be a nightmare. Yeah. I'm sure there's an elevator. But
hats off to all the crews out there. Totally.
Oh yeah, man. I do feel for the crews in a minute, you know, like because I do think they're getting a bit of a raw deal with the old coronavirus.
Absolutely.
But they'll be back this summer.
Yeah,
they'll be doing the business.
We'll all be back there.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
Yeah. Have you got any? Are you gigging this summer?
I got a couple of things lined up. Yeah, I'm just I'm still a bit kind of dubious about things. You know, I still worry about. I want to put on a couple of more events, and I actually really want to wait until next year, you know, and let this year just settle down a little bit more before I kind of get back out there properly doing anything like that. Not that I do loads anymore, but it's I like to do a few over a year. Yeah, put a couple of events.
You've moved on from the DJing now, though, and what is it that you enjoy doing in the musical world now? What's your current
So I obviously I got the bug for making music during that 10-year period of events and the story I've just kind of told, really, and I wanted to. It was okay. I play music. I kind of listen intently. I know how to sequence it, and I want to start to make it. And I was, I ended up starting to go into a lot of recording studios with a lot of big artists because, you know, through the events and associating yourself with a lot of big artists, you know, I'd get invites into recording studios, and I used to go along and stand in the background and watch how everything worked, and I learned that way, position now as a lecturer. There wasn't that many courses around in the early 90s and mid 90s specifically in music production and sound engineering, etc. There was a lot of music courses, should we say, but there wasn't.
Was it really sample based at that point as well still? So
no, the synthesizers were absolutely key to a lot of it, and the external effects processing was key to a lot of music making. To be honest with you, the sample-based stuff, the sample libraries, etc., is what's just blown up in the last 10 years, to be honest.
Because it's kind of where it's where it's all started, though, didn't it? It kind of all started with cutting in samples, and then with the hip hop thing.
Oh, I see that. Right,
and then it obviously has gone full circle and come back to being, but it's even more extreme now, isn't it? People are cutting samples of one guitar strike and sequencing that into a
drum breaks.
A full song.
Drum breaks is what we used to kind of do a lot of, and then cutting up drums, etc. And then the rest of the music was generally, kind of playing synths and using effects. But certainly drums were a key element, and some musical elements, but a lot of the production then was a lot of drum-based sampling and sequencing, reprogramming. But that's really kind of where I got the production bug, and I just spent several years just kind of learning that, and then bought myself a PC. I had a PC, but I kind of just I had one of the first versions of Cubase VST around that time. I played about with some Ataris, Cubase on Ataris in the early 90s. And I learnt Cubase. So I started on Cubase, and then the VST version came out, and got really, really stuck into that. And then I started working.
Was that early 2000s?
Yeah,
no,
mid 90s, probably about 94 now, 95.
Right.
Around those times, if I remember right. And I just put my head straight into production and started buying gear left, right, and centre. Started buying and building up what you see in the background here now. Just you got a place full of gear and synthesizers and everything.
I think you need that for production, though, don't you? Because you need sometimes a bit of inspiration, and sometimes just plugging in something new can give you that little bit of inspiration, or not even new, something that you haven't used for a while can just give you that little bit of inspiration, and then band,
It's
something comes out of it.
Funny you should say that, because I've kind of in recent years just only got stuck in the box, should we say? Using a lot of software-based instruments, etc. And I've totally redesigned this at the end of last year, the studio here, because I kind of wanted to do a lot more different routing and get back into a lot more of my analog gear, and it's actually kind of been a really good new discovering a lot of my analog gear again, discovering a lot of synths that were just leaning up against the wall, and not plugged in.
And I think in the even in the box they've tried to make it more as though it is analog now, haven't they? You go into a synth program and you're connecting wires and you're running all of the, essentially running a analog synth but digitally.
Yes.
And it's why they sound so good now, compared to early VST instruments.
They're very, very, very close to the real analog. The emulations now are just very, very clever on some of the high end stuff. Yeah, and also you've got the sample libraries now, which are I use kind of Native Instruments Contact. It's a one of my firm favourites, and the libraries I've got in there just of orchestras, and real instruments that are. Yeah. And the expression, the articulations are just amazing now. It's almost like having the London Symphony Orchestra at your fingertips on a keyboard.
Have you got that plug-in, the London Symphony Orchestra?
Yeah.
I was gonna say I saw that the other day and was quite keen. I might pick that one up. I don't know how often I'll use it, but it sounds great. It sounds absolutely great.
Beautiful, amazing. Yeah.
So that kind of pulled you into the music production world.
Yeah, pulled me into the music production world, and then I just being in the industry and working around people. You get to meet a lot of people. I was going up and down the country, going into other studios, working with other people, and you just get introduced to a lot of other producers and a lot of, should we say, also publishers, and the next minute I find myself kind of working for a publishing company that was synchronizing music and supplying music for TV adverts and libraries and shows around the world, and I've got asked, do you fancy kind of writing some music for this, and do you want to jump on board onto our publishing roster and write music for library stuff, but also for specific shows, and I got into that and spent a good 10 years, solidly writing a lot of music day in, day out for TV and also for library. Yeah.
Was that still kind of aimed at the house thing that you were doing before, or have you moved quite far away from that now?
I still write bits and pieces of house music. I'm very quite open-minded to music because of the background, and I've studying and analysing music, I think I've got a rather good skill over the years. We're talking a lot of years now of kind of just listening to a piece of music and deconstructing it and going, okay, I know how that's built. I know those elements, and so I used to get a lot of specs. The spec would fall in front of you and say, can you write this hip hop track? Can you do like the Motown, this in a Motown vibe, for example, Motown soul vibe? Yeah, I just listen to some music and start to kind of write and program, in that way.
That's a massive production skill, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
That listening skill. Yeah, like you often find really good mixers are excellent at listening to tracks, and they can tell you every instrument that's going on. And, some of them might not know what is happening musically, but that kind of doesn't matter because they know what it should sound like. Yeah. And in the end, that's the key part of the equation, really, isn't it?
Yeah. My ears are just, I don't know, that is probably one of my biggest skills is that listening and then recreation ability. On that, one of my best attributes, to be honest,
I think that's a general pop skill as well. Like pop musicians, very ear-based, and if you've got a strong enough ear, you've got a strong enough background. Yeah, it's kind of it does all the work for you. So we're kind of at present day now. You're doing a course for the music service about kind of production within different doors and different programs.
Yeah.
And you've been teaching for quite a long time, because earlier on you said about there not being any teaching courses about.
Yeah.
And you kind of, what point did you start moving into that teaching world then?
I fell into it by accident. I was around the mid 2000s. I had a studio in Newquay. I signed to a couple of big labels. So I was kind of. I had another production partnership. We were signed to a couple of big labels. We were writing music on a regular basis, electronic music, and releasing it worldwide, and still doing a lot of touring at that point as well. And music was a full-time job. Music production was a full-time job, and I was also opening the studio commercially. It was quite a big studio. It was a lot bigger than this. It had a live room as well then. And I was doing a lot of commercial work, anything that came in the door, basically. Be it karaoke work or bands coming in and recording and that. And I had this young lady who was signed, who was regularly kind of a singer coming in, and she'd like to make a karaoke demo, so she used to go do a lot of live performances on a regular basis. And she came in, she said, would you be able to teach me on a one-to-one basis? I got some time to do it. I could possibly do it. And she said, but that would be great, because I've also signed up to this kind of adult education course. A recreational music production course run by, I think, one of the producers who used to work with Root Juice. Do you remember Root Juice, the Cornwall? Yeah, the band.
Yeah, I remember.
And she was like really quite excited about it. I gave her a few little sessions as well, and she came in the studio one day and she's quite upset, and I was like, what's up? And she was, they've cancelled the course, I'm gutted. And I said, well, why did they cancel it? And she said, the guy who was going to run it, this guy from Root Juice, has disappeared and gone on to do gone over to New York.
Right.
She goes, well, why didn't you do it? And I was like, I don't know. I've never taught never taught before. I'm not really comfortable around teaching quite a lot of people at once. And I got my arm twisted. Funny, isn't it? I got my arm twisted, and I ended up going down and having a meeting with the principal of the adult education centre at the time, and they were like, "Look, do it, see how it goes," and that's it. I loved it, and from there I just kind of built courses, and then went on to get educated as a teacher. So I did a diploma, and then I did a degree. And teaching, and it was quite interesting how it happened, because electronic music and record sales were taking a big dive at the time, it was almost like it was supposed to happen. It's kind of crossover, There was
that's probably that's got to be like the kind of when indie rock was massive, in rock music kind of made a little bit of a comeback at that sort of time. It's
actually where digital made the big rise, and monetary, everything started to devalue. Everything started to become really. Yeah. I had a record shop at the time as well. At that time in Newquay, which was that took a real big hit because.
Yeah, and I think that's why rock actually managed to sustain, because it was more to do with live gigs than the record sales. Like the record sales were to please the studio or the distributor or whatever it might be, but the bands were making money going out and gigging. Yeah. And so you kind of fell into teaching a bit.
And I just fell into teaching, and I started to run some courses, low level stuff for adult education, which I still do to this day, believe it or not. And then I kind of got headhunted for DBS Music, which are quite a big company, education company that partner up with a lot of colleges and universities around the country, and I've worked for them. I worked for them for about 8 years until last year. I became a course course manager, taught on their HE programs, their diplomas, level 3 diplomas, and great time. Met a lot of great people and worked in a lot of great studios as well, and developed me as a producer and a teacher. And that's kind of where I've got to, and last year I just walked away from that, and I've gone back to setting up on my own and doing a lot of this independent work again. So I'm kind of doing not that it ever stopped, because I was still making music and I was still selling music while I was doing the teaching as well.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it?
Well, none of it ever stopped. And that was the great thing about DBS Music, is that every single lecturer was still active, very much active in the industry. And I think if we are all still active in the industry, students benefit from that. I think that's a great thing about music education, is if you are really active in the industry, those students are going to get a lot from that, because they've got you can answer their questions.
You're a solid contact for them as well, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Like I know lots of my students that I taught probably coming on 10 years ago now. Surprisingly, it's gotten to that point. And when I've got a gig and I need a dep, I know that my students are good enough. So I will call up some of my ex-students and be like, "Oh, could you come and cover this, or can you do that?" Because it's that thing where if you know someone that well, you're gonna know exactly what they're gonna do,
right?
And that's always great when you're looking for new contacts in the industry.
I've also loved opening up the doors for a lot of them as well. Opening up a lot of doors for them, and that for me, that's what teaching is all about. It's music teaching. I just, you get to a point where what's it all about, and I really like passing on the skills and the experience that I've learned over a 30-year career to youngsters, and people just starting out, and I'm doing a few mentoring programs as well outside of this other stuff we're doing with MusicEL at the moment. That's great. I really love a lot of that.
That's great. And
really,
I love it. I think teaching is just an amazing thing to pass on.
Absolutely.
And I think it's almost more to do with inspiration than anything else. And getting kids wanting to play music is just, it's great. Have you got any tips that you always tell any of your students? Have you got anything that you always come back to and it seems to crop up all the time when you're talking to your students?
Passion. You've got to be passionate about it, and that's it. There's no point in putting half an effort into something. I think you've got, and that's one of the things I've always found throughout my life, really, is that if you don't put a lot of work in, you're not going to get a lot out of it. And that was true with skateboarding. I would, and you probably know exactly the same. I'd spend hours upon hours upon hours upon hours trying to perfect a trick, falling down, getting back up, falling down, getting back up, and that's a big life lesson right there. But
just in itself,
just in itself, but just practice and be passionate about it. It's got to feel right and natural.
I
think that's the first thing, because if you've got passion about what you do, then everything else for me will just fall in place.
And I kind of think that, going back to what we just said as well, our job is to inspire, and ultimately if we're doing a good job, then it shouldn't be hard for them to be passionate.
No, exactly.
They should be passionate, because that's the great thing about learning, I guess, in a way.
I get excited even today, just teaching, and some students that I teach are you just absolutely love this side, don't you? And I'm like, well, yeah. Well,
of course,
and they can see that, and you're very kind of passionate about that, when you talk about certain subjects, and they're like, wow, he is very passionate.
I think that's the thing with teachers in general, but we're lucky that we get to teach the subject we love. Do you know what I mean? Whereas when you're a general music teacher, say, you may not have that same passion for every single sector of the the curriculum. But the great thing about, and I especially think for MusicEL, is that each of the teachers is passionate about their one little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't need to be passionate about double bass because I'm really bad at it. And I don't need to, I haven't got that passion there, but there are other people who do have that passion for double bass, and they can fill in that chunk for someone else who has that passion as well. And so we don't have to be as disingenuous, if you like. We can just focus on the bit we really love doing. And I think it's a cool thing about being a music teacher, peripatetic rather than in that classroom environment. And I think probably the same where you were teaching production, really honed in on one sector of the bit that you love.
Yeah.
It's hard not to be passionate about it then.
It's absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's an amazing subject. It's never ending as well, because it is technology, and technology. I think technology has driven music ahead over the years, and it's really kind
massively
of broken boundaries. And I say to students that you can do anything with sound, as long as you've got a really good imagination, and you could be imaginative, and use and be creative, and just have fun. And that's a great thing, experiment. That's a great thing as well,
Yeah, and I think that goes back as well to the we were saying I said about the samples coming back in now. You can really see that people are taking that sample to the absolute end of the earth to get what they hear and what they want to produce. They're just making things that, I don't know, if you heard the original song, you could never imagine what they've produced.
Yeah.
And I think that's technology, it's giving it to them in their hands.
It is. And, happy accidents as well. It's I sit here some days just playing and rooting sounds, and then, oh wow, that's pretty cool, that's just happened there. And okay, I'll just resample that and use that, and then make an instrument out of that, with a sample instrument out of that, recording, and then manipulate that again. And that's what I love about music technology and music production. It's infinite,
kind of limitless,
infinite. What you can actually do and what you can achieve.
So we'll kind of do a bit of a roundabout and end up sort of where we began. And instead of looking at music right back when you started, when you were listening to your grandparents' records in the front room, what role does music play in your life now that you're an adult?
It is my life.
That's the perfect answer.
Without it, I just don't see myself doing anything else. It is my life. I'm lucky enough to make a living out of it and turn it into a job. And I think it's something I say to following on the passion thing. If you're passionate, find what you love to do and try and turn that into a job, because there's nothing better. And you said it, I think you said it earlier, that it then doesn't feel like a job.
No.
Yes, there are days where you feel kind of stressed and pressured to pressure for deadlines and things are happening, but it's still an enjoyment, and I do I don't think I could live without it. I certainly couldn't. It makes me happy. Listening to music still very much makes me happy, just sitting back and listening to music.
What are you listening to at the minute?
Don't even go.
What's on rotation? There's got to be something.
I've started diving back into a lot of old 80s music again, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've been I just been listening in the last week to OMD again. Yeah.
OMD.
Yeah, Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. Do you remember them?
No, well, I'm gonna level with you, Si.
Right.
I was born in '88, so the '80s are a bit of a blur to me in that I wasn't actually technically there.
Fair enough.
So what are they like? What sort of group are they?
Kind of like synth pop. Think they were heavily influenced by Kraftwerk. Let's put it that way.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah.
And if you think along the lines of kind of the '80s bands like Depeche Mode and around those lines.
Okay. OMD.
Yeah.
What's the album?
There's several albums.
What's the one that you recommend?
I'm listening to the Collection again at the moment, actually, which is
like a discography.
Yeah, which is great instead of going through all the albums. But yeah, it's just I'm just listening to a bit of '80s music at the moment, and I've got a very open mind to music. You know, I like to listen to a lot of new and old, but you know, it's I like to listen to a lot of classical. I in the car. I love. I have 6 music on all most of the time because I like all that different mixed genres. I like to hear that on a radio. Some days I'll just switch classic FM on, you know, and in the car driving, I quite like that. You know, it's
I kind of think it's funny in that like music never really changes.
No,
it changes styles, it changes genres, but the like core of what music is always there. You know, like, you know, it's a story about a girl or it's a story about a boy, and it's, you know, or it's about love or loss. Like there's only so many real like categories that music sits in, and they've all got a story. You know, even those classical songs, they were thinking about something. They didn't just write a piece and go, well, that one's done. On to the next classical piece. There's inspiration kind of everywhere, and I think it ties through all different genres of music. And if you can see that, you can listen to anything. Yeah.
Emotion's a big thing for me. I just that's how music can make you feel. That's huge.
And I 100% think that's what it is, really, isn't it? You know, it's all about bending emotions and showing your emotions. Yeah. And
music can make you feel sad, music can make you feel happy. It's just we could just go into all the emotions, and that's what it's about. And that's, you know, you take away music and what is life? You know, it's that saying, isn't there? Life would be flat. You know, so
literally.
But you know, it's just an amazing thing, and I'm so glad I've kind of built a life out of it, and I'll be doing it to the day I die. Absolutely, you know, I'll be sitting in my studio, you know, withering away, you know, and I'll probably rot here.
Right. Just get buried underneath your synthesizers.
Yeah. Put one in the box with me.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me. I can see a similar. I've got a guitar that I've used for like I think 16 years now, and you know, that's going with me. There's nowhere else that's going.
The Egyptians believed if you put it into the crypt, you know, and you take it with you in the afterlife.
Yeah, it's going with me. It's going with me. Cool. Well, I hope the listener has gained a bit of inspiration from this podcast and goes out and not grabs their instrument like normal, but goes out and maybe cracks into a door and starts having a go at producing some music themselves, digitally or analogically. Doesn't really matter, but I hope you're inspired and want to go out and make some music. And remember, every pathway leads to a goal eventually. So why not take them all? Until next time, bye.
See you, everyone. Bye.